Thanks, Chris. To Scott Phillips from Motley Fool. And Scott, good evening. The Australian share market finished 0.7% stronger today. Its best session in 2 weeks. What was behind that?
Tomo, good evening. Yeah, a welcome gain, as you say, the best in a couple of weeks, which is always nice. Only the consumer staples and utility sectors were in the red. Everything else was solidly in the green. Energy and real estate, of all things, leading the charge. Real estate up 2.25% today.
OK, now the Australian dollar bounced back as well.
It did, up almost a full percentage point against the US dollar. Still a long way from where it was, above 71 cents not that long ago. But a couple of days in a row of strength has been positive. Of course, it will remain to be seen how it moves with various interest rate changes in the US and here at home. But for now, at least, slightly better. Not great news for our exporters. They prefer a lower dollar. But if you're going overseas or buying something that comes from overseas, a high dollar is good for you.
IDP Education shares rose 7.5% after the company reported a 127% increase in earnings.
It's a big number, mate, and justifiably so. That's why the share price was up. This business deals a lot with international students, and surprisingly enough, or not surprisingly, obviously, over the last 2 or 3 years, it's been a very, very tough time if you provide services to those international students coming to Australia. The good news for them, and more good news, I think, for some sort of new normal or getting back to normal, is these sort of businesses are doing really, really well. IDP having a very strong last 6 months. Plenty more international students interested in coming to Australia, which is good news across the board. OK,
now this is a crucial one. US Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell will deliver a high-profile speech tomorrow. What can we expect?
This is going to be a really fascinating one. And like everything, it's not so much what he says, but what he says relative to what the market's already expecting. The dominant narrative right now is that he will say something along the lines of rate increases so far have done most of the heavy lifting, and the market's expecting a slowing in the pace of further increases. Remember, of course, they've done a couple of 0.5% and 1.75 percentage point increases in individual months. They're now expecting that to slow down markedly as the inflation beast hopefully has been tamed. Now, of course, that might not be what he says at all, maybe very, very different. If it is, the market will move meaningfully. But hopefully for everybody, it does mean the US is getting in front of that inflation problem and should be good news for the world economy as well.
Yeah, that'd be great news. Before we go, what are the US markets looking like?
More good news out of the US, which is always nice. The early US futures up about 0.9%. So a lot of optimism in the US ahead of that speech, and that'll hopefully be good news for us here tomorrow.
Scott Phillips, thank you.
Thanks, Tomo.